Church. I welcome everyone to our service this morning and welcome visitors to our open and inclusive community of faith. As Unitarian Universalists, we hold that there are many spiritual paths to truth and meaning, and we support one another as we explore these paths. I would like to especially welcome our guests and welcome again those who have visited us before. Visitors, it is the custom of our congregation to invite you to stand and give your name and where you're from, if you feel comfortable doing so. Are there any visitors who would like to introduce themselves? Okay. Well, welcome to everyone visiting today or here today. Please join us after the service for coffee hour. We would love to have a chance to get to know you better. Our service can be heard outside the glass doors at the back of the sanctuary should anyone feel the need to leave the service for any reason. There are chairs provided for your convenience. And as we begin our service, please silence all electronic devices. Thank you.
Let us light our chalice for our seventh principle. We believe in caring for our planet, the home we share with all living things.
Good morning, everyone. The children will be singing for us today. I think that most of you may have received one of these with your order of service. Maybe you could share with your neighbors if not everyone has one. The song the children will be singing is a beautiful song called May All Children by Kenneth Gilmartin. And the children will sing it through once, and then when they sing the second time, we would invite you to join and sing along with them. Thank you.
Children, Thank you, children. Thank you, Jenny. And good morning. My name is James Kubel-Komodo. I'm a Unitarian Universalist minister, and I work on the staff of the Unitarian Universalist Organization, the national organization to which this congregation belongs. I am here this weekend doing some consulting work with your Board of Trustees and Reverend Tom. And Reverend Tom had to be away unexpectedly today, so he asked me to step in for him this morning. I'll also mention, this is my home congregation. This is where I stumbled into a Sunday morning service back when there was only one sanctuary over there, one summer Sunday morning in 1991, just a few years ago. But it's nice to be back among you this morning. Let me share some opening words with you from the writings of Kurt Vonnegut, who was a Unitarian, by the way. And this is from his novel, God Bless You, Mr. Rosewater. Hello, babies. Welcome to Earth. It's hot in the summer and cold in the winter. It's round and wet and crowded. At the outside, babies, you've got about 100 years here. There's only one rule that I know of, babies. God damn it, you gotta be kind. My friends, with these words in our hearts, come, let us worship together.
It is time for us to gather, and I would like to invite our young and young at heart to come forward to join us on our new gathering quilt. Those that attended our campfire back in September when we were doing tie-dyed some squares, and then Jenny sewed them all together into this quilt. Yes, sit on it. So this month, our theme is sanctuary. And today I want to talk about what it means to be a sanctuary to all beings. For example, an animal sanctuary is a place where animals can live where they don't have to worry about being hunted. Or it might be a place where humans actually take care of them if they're sick or injured. So for today's lesson, I want to read a newsletter article that I wrote back on April 3rd in 2006. So I started off, during the past few months, a pair of horned owls have nested in one of our trees in the church backyard, next to the parking lot. You may have seen the nest in the tree over the past years and figured it was just a squirrel's nest. Well, you were right. It was a squirrel's nest, but upon some research, I found that horned owls do not make their own nests. They appropriate them from other large birds or from squirrels. So if you look up into the nest, you can see their head and their tufted feathers sticking up like horns. So on Sunday morning, the previous Sunday morning, I was alerted to the fact that one of the owl babies had fallen out of the nest and was lying on the ground. And we had two concerns. First was the well-being of that fledgling, but we were also worried about the children of the church because owls are very protective of their young, and we didn't want to leave the baby laying on the ground. Plus, it was early April. It was cold that day. So we wanted to take care of that owl. So Steve Connett and Karen C. Morels, members of our church, contacted Willowbrook Wildlife Center, which is located in Glen Ellen, and drove the fledgling there, hoping that it could be kept alive. And the Wildlife Center took it in and obtained our contact information because it was their hopes that if it does stay alive, that they would return it to the nest. So a day later, I got a phone call, and it was Willowbrook. And they said, we still have the owl, it's alive, we want to bring it back. So that afternoon, a crew arrived, and one of the Forest Preserve workers climbed up the tree. And as he was climbing, the mother flew away and watched us from various viewpoints. Do you see the mother? You see her? Here's a better view. There she is. So the climber reached up to the top, to the nest, and found that there was another fledgling inside of the nest. But he also found that the nest was a little too small and not very well kept. So they decided that it was time that they would make a platform and build it in that tree and move the nest and the fledgling onto that platform. So he removed both the fledgling and the nest and put them in separate buckets, and then he transitioned them to the nest. He transitioned the nest and the fledgling to the platform, and this is the platform there. That's the one that fell out of the tree. So according to the wildlife specialist, Sandy Woltman, who assisted in the replacement, the babies were about 2 weeks old. So after taking pictures of the fallen fledgling, it was raised in a bucket up to the platform and placed with its sibling. So they were not able to determine whether it was a male or female owl because their sex organs are internal, and the plumage of both genders are the same. So the only way that you can tell what gender they are is when they become adults, because the adult female is 30% bigger than the male. So the man climbed down the tree and removed all the ropes and climbing gear as Mom Owl continued to watch from afar. So on the next day, when I came back to church, I found Mom Owl in the platform. That was a sign that everything was good. And obviously, I was curious about her, but she was curious about me too. So every angle that I was at trying to take a picture of her, she was always staring at me, as owls do. And it was the following Sunday, on April 9th, that I looked out during coffee hour and saw the baby's head sticking above the edge of the platform. Now, you can't really see it there, but now, in that picture, you can see just 2 little puffs of white above the edge of the platform. That's the babies. And here's the mom watching from not too far away. Oh, there we go. So it was almost a week and a half later, on April 20th, that we spotted the babies again, and they had grown quite a bit. Can you see the baby's head sticking out? You can see the eye and the beak. Here's a closer shot. There we go. But the biggest joy was another couple weeks later, on May 2nd, when we saw them out on a branch. And you can see both of them. One's in the platform yet, just looking out, and we have the one that's on the branch. Do you know what they call? You guys were at the first service. Let's see what the others think, and then I'll let you answer. Do you guys know what they call baby owls at this stage when they're out on the branches? Sophia, what do they call them? Oh, okay. Harper? Branchers. So they're out on the branches, so they're branchers. So it wasn't too long after this that they started flying and hunting for themselves. And we continued to see them flying around all that summer and into the winter. And we provided them with our own sanctuary. And we had hoped that they would return in the future and use the platform as a nest again. But that summer, with all the winds and storms and the way that the platform was in the tree, the platform didn't make it through the summer. So we had to call up Willowbrook and have them come back and pull it down from the tree so it wouldn't drop onto somebody. Do any of you have any questions? Yes, Ben. Well, at that point, it wouldn't be the same nest. So we'd rather let them actually use a nest, because all the nest, since the platform tipped like that, all the nest had just fallen out. Yes? Maybe. So Robin asked if we had seen them since. Horned owls lived to be over 20 years old, so they could still be here now. We do still see horned owls hunting on the property. We have a great hunting place out here for owls. So we have seen horned owls. Don't know if it's them or not. We don't have a way of identifying, but probably. Chances are. Jim, do you have a question?
Did you name them?
No. Now, there might have been names given to them by some of the people of the congregation, but I did not have any names for them. Yeah, I know. Let's sing a song. Please stand in body or spirit. We're going to sing Spirit of Life twice. It's song number 123 in the gray hymnal.
Good morning, everyone. I'm glad you're here this morning. Today's reading is taken from the writings of UU minister Edward Frost. I love those who are angry with me because they care deeply about something they feel I may have hurt. I love those who criticize me because they need something they think I can give. I love shy people because they are more like me, really, than the blustery and self-assured whom I love because I know how they really feel. I love the know-it-alls because they know they don't know what is really important. I love those who talk too much because I know how much they fear the silence. And I love the quiet ones because they are usually listening. I love those who love me in spite of what they may know about me. Now, we have a very abrupt transition.
My understanding is that we are soon going to have a fire drill. This is how this is going to work. Those seated in this section of the sanctuary will exit through the tower here. Those seated in this part of the sanctuary will exit through the rear doors. We're all going to move across the street, and if this goes as well as the first service, you'll only be out there about 30 seconds, so don't worry about grabbing jackets and stuff like that. And I hear the alarm, so let's proceed.
standing at the crossing where day and night divide. It takes all of your heart to keep the light alive. The darkness seems so endless until the dawn arrives. Hold the spark between us and keep our light alive. Look at the land. The trees are bare as bones. The chill is coming on, and all the summer birds have flown. But if the winter coat you wear is worn a bit too thin, then let me stand between you and the howling wind. We're standing at the crossing where day and night divide. It takes all of your heart to keep the light alive. The darkness seems so endless until the dawn arrives. We'll hold a spark between us and keep the light alive. These are the times we try the strongest souls. You draw the curtain back, you see the bitter cold. But if the candle that you're holding has grown a bit too dim, then let me stand beside you till the sun pours in. We're standing at the crossing where day and night divide. It takes all of your heart to keep the light alive. And the darkness that between us seems so endless until the dawn arrives. We'll hold a spark between us, keep the light alive. We'll hold a spark between us, keep the light alive. We'll hold a spark between us, keep the light alive.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you for your gift of music to us this morning. It's always dangerous to make generalizations, especially gross generalizations. But I'm going to make one this morning. There are only two kinds of religion in this country, and most people practice either one kind or the other. And when I talk about there being two kinds of religion in this country, I'm not talking about there being Jews and Gentiles, Christians and pagans, Catholics and Protestants, born-agains and once-was-enougers. I'm not talking about those who take the Bible literally and those who don't take the Bible literally. When I talk about there being two kinds of religion in this country, very simply put, I'm talking about there being one kind of religion that puts an emphasis on being holy, and one kind of religion that puts an emphasis on being compassionate. And let me say more about this distinction, and also give some credit where credit is due. First learned about this distinction from Marcus Borg, a professor of religion at Oregon State University, reading one of his early books, Meeting Jesus Again for the First Time. In this book, Borg traces the history of this distinction back to the time of Jesus and describes the purity system of first century of first-century Jewish society in which Jesus lived. Borg says that the effect of a purity system was to create a world with sharp social boundaries between pure and impure, righteous and sinner, whole and not whole, male and female, rich and poor, Jew and Gentile. In many ways, the purity system gave religious justification to an exploitive social system. I'll take questions after the service.
And disobedient to that list.
Much of Jesus' ministry, Borg says, can be understood as a critique on the purity system. Many of the stories told about Jesus and many of the stories that Jesus told involved violations of purity codes. And the point of many of these stories was that compassion was more important than purity. Have you ever wondered why the angels appeared to shepherds in the Christmas story? It's because shepherds were considered very impure, and having the angels appear to shepherds was a way of criticizing those purity codes. Jesus practiced and preached a gospel of radically inclusive, unconditional love, saying that everybody should love everybody, no matter what. Now, the conflict between Jesus, who emphasized compassion, and the religious, political, and economic elites who emphasize purity and wholeness can be summarized in the juxtaposition of two Bible verses. Those who emphasize purity and wholeness love to cite Leviticus 19:2. You shall be holy, for I, the Lord God, am holy. In response to this, Jesus said, be compassionate, as God is compassionate. That verse, by the way, is Luke 6:36, and it's not a bad one to remember. Now, I know, Unitarian Universalists are not very big on memorizing Bible verses, but if you memorize only one out of the entire Bible, if you memorize only one, Luke 6:36 is a good one to have up your sleeve. I was once sitting in a Starbucks in the city where I live, and a man walked down and he sat down next to me. Are you a Unitarian Universalist minister? He asked. I am, I answered, a little bit surprised, wondering how he knew. My wife says there's a Unitarian Universalist look, but I'm not quite sure what it is, and I'm a little afraid to ask. Is it true, he asked, that Unitarian Universalists allow gay and lesbian people to get married in their churches? It is, I said. And then the man began to quote the Bible at me, chapter and verse, to convince me that same-sex relationships are unholy. So I asked him, is it more important to be holy or compassionate? Holy, he said. It's an interesting answer, I said. In Leviticus, it does say, be holy as God is holy. But in the Sermon on the Plain in the Gospel of Luke, Jesus says, be compassionate as God is compassionate. Seems like Jesus preferred compassion to holiness. And the man just sat there, flustered, his face turning a bright red, his nostrils flaring. And then suddenly, in the middle of Starbucks, the man stood up, rising to his full height. He was taller than I am. He was bigger than I am. He was taller than Chris Walton. He took a step back from where I was standing, and he pointed his finger at me. And then he shouted at me in a voice that could be heard throughout the restaurant. He shouted at me, woe be unto you, And then he stormed out of the restaurants. I had never had anybody shout, "Woe be unto you," at me. Especially in the middle of Starbucks. To tell you the truth, it was quite invigorating. I didn't feel like I needed more coffee that morning. In fact, I didn't need any more coffee that whole week. But just like in Jesus' time, it seems like a lot of the difference in how people understand what it means to be religious in this country can be understood in whether they think that purity and holiness is most important, or whether they think compassion is most important. According to those who think holiness is most important, the most important things are believing the right things, and using the right words, and saying the right prayers in the right order. The things they're worried about most in this country are things like foul language, and dirty movies, and the pernicious effect of video games, gambling, and God help us, anything to do with sex. Because they all know that sex is dirty, and it's filthy, and that's why you gotta save it for the one you love. For folks who are obsessed with purity, Jesus is not to be admired because of the selfless way he lived his life. For them, Jesus is like a supernatural spot remover able to absolve any inky blotch from any soiled soul. On the other hand, according to those who think compassion is most important, the things that they're worried about most are things like, say, feeding the hungry, welcoming the stranger, the immigrants, caring for the sick, visiting the prisoner, things based in compassion. Now, I don't want my words this morning to sound like an attack on any particular religious tradition. I think you find people who emphasize either holiness or compassion in every religious tradition in the world. In Hinduism, there are tensions between holiness and compassion. In Buddhism, there are tensions between holiness and compassion. In Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, there are tensions between holiness and compassion. And my friends, even in Unitarian Universalism, there are tensions between holiness and compassion, although they look just a little bit different than in some other churches. Don't think that there are implicit purity codes in some Unitarian Universalist churches. Just ask somebody who eats at McDonald's rather than Marlene's, shops at Walmart rather than Trader Joe's, drives an SUV with a Trump bumper sticker rather than a Prius or a Subaru with a Clinton bumper sticker on it, pasted over an Obama bumper sticker, pasted over a Sanders bumper sticker, pasted over a Kucinich bumper sticker, while listening to AM radio rather than WBEZ. Ask them if they've never experienced a holier than thou or less than compassionate attitude at a Unitarian Universalist church. Of course, what some folks experience in Unitarian Universalist congregations is not really a holier than thou attitude, it's more of a granolier than thou attitude. I'm not suggesting that anything like that would ever happen in this congregation, but I'm just saying, in other congregations, it might happen. And I want to suggest that when holiness gets stressed in any religious tradition, or stressed too much, you get things for which religion is worst known: divisiveness, hierarchy, domination, discrimination, exploitation, even violence. Because once you divide up the world between the holy and the unholy, you provide religious justification. You provide religious justification for doing violence to those considered unholy. And I want to suggest that when you stress compassion, you get the things for which religion is best known. However, I want to make an even bolder claim with you this morning. I believe that the highest priority of any Unitarian Universalist congregation should be helping its members grow spiritually. And by growing spiritually, I'm not talking about anything woo-woo. I'm talking about learning to live more fully, deeply, and richly. I'm talking about learning to live with more connection and meaning in our lives. Because I think all of us have a deep yearning for more connection and meaning in our lives. And in fact, in order to grow spiritually myself, I ask myself 4 questions every day, or at least I try to ask myself these 4 questions every day. How can I live with more compassion today? What am I most grateful for today? What do I need to accept, or who do I need to forgive today? And how can I live with more commitment today to some cause greater than myself? How can I live with greater commitment to worthy goals? In other words, I focused on 4 virtues: compassion, gratitude, acceptance, and commitment. At times, I have asked myself, is any one of these more important than the others? And as I have wrestled with this question, what I have come back to again and again is that if any kind of spirituality is to be authentic, compassion must come first. Before gratitude, before acceptance, before commitment to worthy goals. At least I know this is true of me. Unless I put compassion first, it's too easy for me to get stuck with my head in the clouds. It's too easy for me to end up marveling at the mystery of the stars or the miracle of a flower in spring while my neighbor goes hungry. It's too easy to become what the Unitarian Universalist minister Peter Rabel once called a navel-gazing bliss ninny. But in becoming more compassionate and trying to become more compassionate, I believe we have to start with those closest to us, those emotionally closest to us, our families, our neighbors, our friends, and even, my friends, our fellow church members. We don't want to end up like Mrs. Jelby, the character in Bleak House, who woefully neglects her children while pursuing charitable causes overseas. She was a woman with handsome eyes, Charles Dickens writes, though they had a curious habit of seeming to look a long way off, as if they could see nothing nearer than Africa. I don't want to suggest it's easy being compassionate to those emotionally closest to us. It isn't. I grew up in Naperville and Lisle, and I still have family here. And there are certain things in my life that are just a lot easier living 2,000 miles away now. I also don't want to suggest it's always easy being compassionate to fellow church members. In fact, I know it sometimes isn't. But I want to suggest for your consideration this morning that it's the most important thing that you as a congregation can do. I want to suggest it's the most important thing that you as a congregation can do. Your worship service this month, I'm told, is sanctuary. What would it be like, I wonder, if you tried to make this congregation a sanctuary of compassion? If you tried to say, this was the place in your life where you tried the hardest to be compassionate to other people, and where other people could walk in the door and feel that compassion when they walked through the doors of the sanctuary. What if you made this place a place where you tried to be most compassionate to both the people that you agreed with and liked, and even the people you disagreed with and sometimes didn't like. What would that be like? Here's my guess. My guess is that you would often fail, but you should do it anyway. But why would I say such an awful thing to all of you, many who I have just met for the very first time this morning? And the reason I say that is because I fail so often. A few years back, I took my wife, our son, and our dog to a dog park near Seattle on New Year's Day. There was a woman in front of me at the parking ticket machine. She had gotten out of her car and was fumbling with the buttons. I hope this fool doesn't take forever, I muttered to myself. And suddenly the woman was walking toward my car window. I didn't know what I was doing, and I ended up buying 2 tickets, she said. Here, she said, passing one through the window. Happy New Year. I fumbled with my wallet to pay her, and she waved her hand dismissively. Happy New Year, she said. I felt ashamed and chastised by my conscience. As a minister, I have been professionally trained to be nice. But the truth is, I struggle every day not to be as judgmental, indifferent, uncaring, and every once in a while just plain mean, as I sometimes am. Being compassionate is not easy. However, if we are to live the fullest, deepest, richest, most abundant, most satisfying lives that are possible for us, I believe it's where we have to start. And when we fail, start over again after that. And when we fail again, start over again after that. And church is as good a place as any to practice. So may it be. Amen.
As most of you know, once a month we take up a special collection for an organization that supports UU values. Today's loose plate collection will be given to Habitat for Humanity, the DuPage County group. If you wish to write a check, I remind you to make the check out to DUUC, and in the memo line, note that it's a contribution to Habitat for Humanity. DuPage Habitat for Humanity builds and sells homes to working families using the funds and volunteers provided by corporate, faith-based, and individual sponsors. Habitat homes are not simply given away, nor are they earned solely through what's called sweat equity. Homes are built by volunteers and partner families and then sold to the families on the basis of need, their ability to repay, and for me, most importantly, their program includes an educational block to educate people from the socioeconomic level. They may not understand the responsibilities of home ownership, including maintenance and those other things that come with having a 30-year mortgage. The present build is always open to volunteers, and the introduction to the special collection includes me mentioning that all volunteers are welcome. The video music will accompany the offertory.
Will you be my refuge, my haven in the storm? Will you keep the embers warm when my fire's all but gone? Will you remember and bring me sprigs of rosemary? Be my sanctuary till I can carry on, carry on, carry on. This one knocked me to the ground. This one dropped me to my knees. I should have seen it coming, but it surprised me. Will you be my refuge, my haven in the storm? Will you keep the embers warm when my fire's all but gone? Will you remember and bring me sprigs of rosemary? Be my sanctuary till I can carry on, carry on, carry on. In a state of true believers, on streets called us and them, it's gonna take some time till the world feels safe again. Will you be my refuge, my haven in the storm? Will you keep the embers warm when my fire's all but gone? Will you remember and bring me sprigs of rosemary? Be my sanctuary till I can carry on, carry on, carry on. You can rest here in Brown Chapel or with a circle of friends, a quiet grove of trees or between two bookends. Will you be my refuge, my haven in the storm? Will you keep the embers warm when my fire's all but gone? Will you remember and bring me sprigs of rosemary? Be my sanctuary till I can carry on, carry on, carry on, carry on.
Our closing hymn this morning is number 298 in your great hymnals, Wake Now My Senses. Will you please rise in body and or spirit. Jim is going to play it through once and then we'll sing together.
Right now, our senses
May we do so with ever more love for one another, with ever more gratitude for this precious gift of life we share among us this very day, with ever more peace in our hearts, with ever more hope for our own lives, for this world we share. Amen.
Amen.